On shaky ground, the 1989 San Francisco earthquake retro report from the New York Times.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Couric. A strong earthquake rocked the San
Catherine Couric. All right, simpler times.
Francisco Bay Area just moments ago.
6.9 is what we're hearing.
Big enough to bring cities in Northern California to their knees.
In 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake sent a deadly shockwave across Northern California. And from the earthquake's opening jolt, which came during a live broadcast of the World Series, to coverage of the grisly aftermath, Loma Prieta became a national television event.
This was the most watched earthquake and probably one of the most watched natural disasters in American history.
The earthquake left.
So this was actually posted in 2014 about the earthquake in 1989.
63 people dead, caused as much as $10 billion in damage, and touched off a national conversation about seismic readiness, and not just for California.
Of course, California is not the only state subject to earthquakes. Take a look at this map of the United States and the earthquake zones.
The San Francisco quake demonstrates that you can never prepare enough.
But a quarter century later, how much preparing really happened after the panic died down?
This was a wake-up call.
It's pretty crazy, right? Like, this was a wake-up call. All of the hysteria, at least it was real. All right, I think at this point in time, everything has to be called into question. But this happened. The Bay Bridge broke. The World Series was stopped. Now they just tell you, well, there's deadly air outside the front door.
But I think a lot of people have gone back to sleep.
And again, it's going to be a little bit funny to watch New York Times footage from 2014 before they completely lost it, right? I'm sure they were never really truly honest, but before they completely lost it, before Rona was a different time where they are looking back into the late 80s.
And home for the Giants, one of the most spectacular vistas on this continent.
It was a fabulous October day. The weather was spectacular. The whole city was excited.
Art Agnos, that was the San Francisco mayor. Well, yeah, I don't know about, London Breed, Ed Lee, Gavin Newsom. I don't know what was happening back then.
Battle of the Bay continues.
Just after 5 p.m. on October 17th, 1989, baseball fans across the country tuned in to see the San Francisco Giants face the Oakland A's in a broadcast that would soon go down in television history.
Which is already crazy. The Oakland A's versus the San Francisco Giants in the World Series, and then a crazy earthquake happens.
Oakland A's take.
Tell you what, we're having an earthquake.
We were just driving into the parking lot at Candlestick Park when we felt the earthquake. There was a state of confusion.
All of a sudden it hit. I didn't know where I was for 5 seconds. I still feel like throwing up right now.
The game will be postponed.
Yo, look at the old SFPD Cruiser. Absolute fire.
Hostage leave in an orderly fashion.
Police officers came to me and said, Mr. Mayor, we've got to take you to the command post downtown because the Bay Bridge has fallen in. They're on.
I already forgot that guy's name, but the mayor at that time, that could be worth looking into.
Television were scenes from helicopters showing the upper deck had fallen into the lower deck.
The shaking registered a magnitude 6.9, the biggest quake the Bay Area had seen since the great San Francisco earthquake of 1906.
Shut off the gas, shut off electricity, store water.
Coverage of the Bay Bridge collapse, fires in San Francisco's Marina District, and a collapsed viaduct along Oakland's 880 freeway dominated newscasts for days. Out of the 63 people killed in the quake, 42 died after the elevated section of roadway fell down.
I don't know how the hell.
This is crazy, right? And obviously there's no Twitter, there's no Instagram, barely any cell phones. I suppose maybe the richest of the rich, the most important people. I don't know, when did cell phones become like a common thing. I think the iPhone came out in 2007. You know, BlackBerry, Sidekicks, all that stuff. Obviously, there were cell phones, Motorola's, but I don't think in 1989. I could be fact check me, Jamie. Pull that up. I don't know when everybody started to walk around with them, but I don't think it was 1989. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We're going to get them out, okay?
So, right, imagine if a earthquake happens during rush hour and you just, I guess that's how the world used to be.
One woman is unconscious, bleeding from the head.
The earthquake took its name from Loma, Prieta mountain, about 60 miles south of San Francisco, where scientists pinpointed the event's epicenter. Nearby towns in Santa Cruz County saw 16,000 homes and businesses damaged or destroyed in the quake, far more than in San Francisco.
It's also kind of weird to think about. We have advanced hugely technologically, but it seems almost like the architecture and the buildings have gotten lesser. Like they're uglier, and they're probably not put together as well. All sorts of particle board and 80 migrants living under them. Like, anyways, I digress. It's just so technology up, architecture down.
Most of the people who died in older buildings.
As the full extent of the damage became clear, coverage soon turned to how to fortify structures against future quakes.
Officials can only hope to reinforce the ones still standing and rebuild the ones destroyed with stricter standards before another major earthquake hits.
And this question keeps coming up after every earthquake.
We have a huge inventory of these old buildings that we're trying to strengthen. It's costly. It's very
Yeah, and they're talking about the old buildings that were dangerous then, but now there's new buildings, most notably the Millennium Tower in San Francisco, that's been a headache basically since day one, and it has started to sink. Then you got, of course, the abandoned project in Los Angeles that got covered in graffiti. Now, I don't know how that was structurally, but they certainly abandoned it because the money ran out, the well run dry, the scam, it dried up. And then there's also 432 Park Avenue in New York. Park Avenue, some of the most expensive real estate in the country, if not the world, has, I don't know, don't quote me on this, worth a fact check, but 432 Park, I mean, the building is like 80% empty. It's become like an investment drop for foreign billionaires or whatever, but there's some structural, there's some less than, it's not perfect. It's less than structurally sound, I believe.
very political, and there are very large social and economic costs that we have to bear.
In California, the message largely got through. Authorities there have made efforts to boost seismic readiness after nearly every major shaker since 1933. But Loma Prieta in 1989, followed 5 years later by a 6.7 quake near the Northridge section of Los Angeles, sent the state's preparations into high gear.
People's thinking...
I forgot about that one, the Northridge earthquake too.
was startled by the amount of damage. It was a slap up the side of the head.
In the last 25 years, California taxpayers spent billions retrofitting mass transit and regional water systems.
And now in 2024, they want taxpayers, the California taxpayers, to pay billions of dollars for Gavin Newsom's new mental health outreach program or whatever.
Public buildings and schools, in one of the largest undertakings of
it's just crazy. Cities like San Francisco and New York, I mean, absolute engineering and architectural masterpieces that have just been, I mean, they just laugh in the face. Nobody can really do anything now, right? Like they built that bridge and then it broke and they rebuilt it. They built the Salesforce Tower, all of this stuff. I mean, think about the pre-wars in New York and Brooklyn, pre-war apartments, pre-war buildings in San Francisco. Absolutely gorgeous, amazing architecture. And now there's just nobody wants to do that anymore. It's all very sterile, right? Glass and steel, and of course I think it's not even put together as well, but
its kind, transit authorities retrofitted or replaced more than 2,000 bridges statewide, from obscure highway overpasses to the new Oakland Bay Bridge. Despite delays and construction missteps, the bridge now stands as one of the busiest toll crossings in America.
It's unprecedented.
One of the busiest toll crossings in America that people block up for Palestine and then demand. They block up the traffic to save Palestine. They get arrested, get charged, and then demand that the charges get dropped. Because, I mean, these people get their way, right? Like, how far have we come?
Cost of the bridge behind my shoulder is a little over $6 billion. The cost of retrofitting or replacing all the toll bridges in our region for earthquake safety was about $9 billion. If you want to throw in those 2,000 highway bridges, you're probably throwing in another couple billion on top of that.
California has made the largest financial commitment to earthquake risk reduction in the country.
Yet coverage of Loma, Prieta, and later quakes sounded an alarm for fault zones far beyond California.
It's easy to forget that other parts of this country face an earthquake threat.
Only the upper Midwest seems to be free of them.
Oregon and Washington in particular have the potential for even larger earthquakes than does California.
Oregon formed its own statewide seismic safety commission specifically in response to the 1989.
See, that was the good old days when you can just, be scared of the ground shaking, but now the sun monster is going to kill you if you drive a truck.
Quake. One of its members, Jay Wilson, felt the shock personally. He was a college student in San Francisco when Loma Prieta struck.
The earthquake really framed things and gave me a sense of purpose. It became my career path.
He's since found work as a hazard mitigation specialist in Portland, where he preaches the gospel of preparedness full-time.
A hazard mitigation specialist? Who's paying you for that?
It is evangelical in a way. It's a righteous truth when you're talking about earthquake safety to people,
Since the mid-1980s, scientists in the Pacific Northwest have uncovered evidence that every 3 centuries or so, the region gets rocked by earthquakes registering between magnitude 8 and 9.
The last one occurred more than 300 years ago. So we're already skating on thin ice. And when we dug into it a little further,
Oh, I was going to get you. We're almost there. It's almost time.
We found out the actual repeat time is more like 240 years for any of these earthquakes. So we're out.
How could you possibly know that? I mean, what are you talking about, bro?
Past the edge of the thin ice.
Goldfinger's research teams look for evidence of past earthquakes in underwater sediments, which can reveal patterns of tectonic shifts. The record shows more than 40 great earthquakes have struck the region in the last 10,000 years.
It's not like we're predicting some far-flung thing like getting hit by an asteroid. There's a 100% chance of an earthquake. It's just a matter of what the time is. Is it going to be in the next 5 minutes? Is it going to be 500 years from now?
His studies forecast a 40% chance that Oregon will see an offshore quake of magnitude 8 or greater in the next 50 years. In the worst-case scenario,
so Oregon's going to see a pretty big earthquake in the next 50 years. Oh, pay that guy. Cut the check.
Could be a magnitude 9 mega event. After a similar quake struck Japan in 2011, Oregon's Seismic Safety Commission published a report on how well the state would handle such an earthquake if no further preparations are made. The findings were grim. As many as 10,000 people dead in a tsunami. Some essential services knocked out for years. Economic impacts felt for a generation.
We have a computer program that estimated $30 billion worth of damage. I think that's crazy low.
In recent years, Oregon disaster readiness experts have begun advocating for greater tsunami preparation and better building codes. But in a region where earthquake readiness wasn't even mentioned in most statewide codes until the 1970s, thousands of unreinforced buildings, bridges, and utilities remain dangerously vulnerable.
The bridge.
Perfect. Time to slip some more government in, which makes sense, right? Like, that's probably what they're supposed to do. Right? They won't fill the potholes, not in cities across the country. They used to build bridges and stuff. That's what they were for. And now they are, beefing up the IRS to usher in communism and cut your kids' junk off.
What we're looking at here was built in 1931. It is highly likely to be at least unusable after a big earthquake and possibly a pile of wreckage in the river. Basically, what we're saying is that 80% of everything in Oregon needs to be fixed. So the real key is to get those.
So 80% of everything in Oregon needs to be fixed. Just Just let it drift off into the Pacific and start over. How about that?
Processes in place, and then hope we have 50 years.
With such a hazard on the horizon, why aren't faults...
There's 50 years. It's like the Seinfeld clip. How about if you're not married in 10 years and I'm not married in 10 years, we get hitched? And Elaine said, that's Kramer. Sorry, I'm butchering that. But 50 years? Okay, yeah. We can all... Greta Thunberg wants to predict the future. AOC said 12 years. Of course, we're actually getting pretty close to when she first... Well, when did she say that? In 2019? Whatever. Doesn't matter. Of course, you can just throw anything out there, man. Oh, we're all going to die from the sun monster in 12 years. Oh, there's going to be an earthquake in 50 years. And sure, I guess that's a good enough reason to pay more taxes.
Zones like Oregon doing more. What is it about an earthquake that makes it so hard to convince people to prepare?
You finally asked the million...
Wow, sounds pretty similar, right? Like, what? We've been scaremongering them about the sun monster for so long. What? How come we can't convince them? Because you just got to live your life, bro. Jesus. These people, it's like, I mean, this is obviously I'm not a earthquake truther, but this kind of built the foundation, right? Like they did this, they scaremonger with this, and now they can do it with, of course, the sun monster. They just kind of keep on building and building, taking a little kernel of truth and blowing it completely out of proportion.
$1 question.
Dennis Milletti is a sociologist who has spent his career studying disaster readiness.
Yeah, the scientist studies disaster readiness. All right, cool.
Human beings are wired to believe that they live on a safe planet. We're wired to ignore high consequence, low probability events.
Yep, that's exactly what he's saying. Well, you should just be scared. Stop living your life, be scared. All right, bro. I guess if you didn't say that, you wouldn't have a job.
The truth is, as scientists know, it's not a safe planet.
But you should probably go get your, prepare with Eric kit, right? You can get your doomer prep kit. And I'm not knocking the doomers, right? Like there's, I guess, everything in moderation, but it's kind of weird to see the progression of what they knew they could get away with, like even with Rona, right? Oh, we're going to take away this and stop that for Rona. And outdoor dining is going to be temporary, but now that's permanent. Oh, we're going to get 2 shots, but now you got to get 2 shots every 2 months. I mean, they just, right? Everything starts out of necessity, and then it never sundowns.
Quakes may be inevitable over the centuries, but the probability one will happen tomorrow is low. And Milletti says the difference between the level of preparation in California and Oregon is pretty easy to explain.
The number one motivator to get the public in general to prepare for high consequence, low probability events is to go through one. And the public in
high consequence, low probability events. Yeah, prepare for those. I guess so, a little bit, but you guys took it too far. And this is from 2014, looking back on 1989.
Oregon is no different than the public anywhere. They don't.
And I thought this was like a documentary about San Francisco, and then it somehow shifted to Oregon. I thought we were going to hear a little bit more about the Bay Area, but whatever.
Perceive there's a tsunami risk or that there's an earthquake risk. Why? They haven't personally experienced it.
And even when they have, Milletti says the effect can be fleeting.
It lasts about 2 years, and then the public interest goes back to where it was before the event occurred.
Just last month, tremors in Los Angeles.
The fear lasts for 2 years. All right. And now, so they started fear-mongering Rona in 2020. In 2024, yeah, I guess it subsided, but you do still have those crazy people. There's that clip of the woman who just, I don't know if it's satire. It's very tough to tell these days, but, some of my best friends, family members stopped masking. Stopped masking. In 2024, they decided to stop wearing the mask, which I never did. I put it below my chin as a submission necklace to get into the grocery store, but that was about it.
Puts seismic readiness back in the news.
Unsettling rumbles this afternoon, shattering nerves in Southern California.
It wasn't the big one, but it was big enough.
Authorities say it should be a warning for people to be prepared.
Even in America's most earthquake-ready state, large gaps in preparedness.
I guess San Francisco has been prepared, right? Like a lot of people just live on the street, so the building they're in doesn't collapse on them.
Remain.
Preparedness in California is as good as it gets, which doesn't mean it's adequate.
With no statewide rules about retrofitting seismically vulnerable homes,
Oh, we need more rules, more regulations from 10 years ago. The government needs to do more because the earthquake could hit. And I'm sure they're just loving the advancement of this perhaps real threat into don't drive a truck or the sun monster is going to kill you. Seems similar. They just built on it.
Hundreds of thousands of California buildings can still topple in major quakes.
I don't think anybody's ready enough.
And of course, now if there were an earthquake, they could say, oh, you should be prepared for an earthquake. But also the earthquake was caused by global warming, global heating, climate catastrophe.
A quarter century after the warning of 1989, the worry is shared by many who are paid to watch fault lines and wait for them to slip.
Who is paying these people? They're paid to watch fault lines. This is a government job. This is a private company. What do they sell? How are they getting paid?
It doesn't take much for me to get really anxious if I think about it too much. When it does happen, people are going to look up and go, who in the hell was working on this?
Well, pretty crazy to watch the New York Times from 2014 look back on 1989.